Hello and welcome. I'm David Robinson, the online editor at The Banker, and today we're looking at the development of digital payment systems in Japan and some of the issues that are holding it back. This is the cover story of the August issue of The Banker. With me to discuss this is Kimberley Long, the Asia editor. So, Kim, what is the current payment climate in Japan? Are other forms of payments emerging, or is cash still king?
Hi, David. Well, in Japan, really, it's quite a cash-based society. And even though there's a lot of development with different forms of payment types, it's still very much dependent on cash. So we're seeing a few different payments types emerging, though. So obviously there are things like debit cards and credit cards, for example, but then also they have like payment cards used for transportation, which can also be used in shops, which are gaining more traction. And then also as well, you have their mobile payment platforms as well. So you have, for example, there's Rakuten Pay, which is run by the Rakuten company, which is an online e-commerce company. You also have Line Pay, which is through messaging app Line, which is very popular social media platform in Japan. And also you have PayPay, which is another mobile payment platform. And actually PayPay and Line Pay are in the process of going through like a merger where you'll actually be able to use Line Pay and PayPay apps interchangeably in different shops, depending on, what point of sale terminal they have. So, there's a few different things that are emerging out there, but actually, the cash transactions still remain the most prominent. So even though we've seen credit card payments grow to around 30% of all payments in 2020, it's actually still cash, which is accounting for around kind of 70% of all overall payments in the country, which is an incredibly high number. And the Japanese government has really tried to push forwards for the use of more cashless transactions and have set a target 40% of all transactions to be made through these various contactless payment methods by 2025 in time for the Osaka Expo 2025. But as it stands at the moment, it's still quite a lot of resistance to moving towards using these contactless or primarily cashless payment methods.
It's interesting, Kim. What is stopping the greater adoption of digital payments?
Well, I think there's a several reasons really, and there's no one kind of overarching reason, but it's kind of a combination of a lot of different elements which is really causing this. So I think kind of primarily when you look at maybe other markets in Asia, like China, for example, which has obviously kind of accelerated so fast with its digital payments. With China, there was really no other secondary system in place. So they didn't really have debit cards or credit cards in the way that Japan has. So in order to move forwards to a more online friendly method of making payments, that's where they really leapfrogged ahead and went into using the app-based payments like WePay and Alipay. So that's really what has been seen there. But when you look at Japan, because there isn't really that same level of friction in place, it's not really pushed things forwards as much towards needing to use mobile apps to actually have a method of making payments. But when you look at, the more widely why cash is still so prevalent, there's so many ATM machines, for example, there's thousands of ATM machines per person really in Japan. And they're really easily available. They're in banks, they're in post offices, they're in convenience stores, which are just absolutely ubiquitous across the country. So there's no need for people to really move away from using cash. And also a lot of the point of sales terminals that are needed for cards and debit cards, for example, and for online payments, they're quite expensive and there's fees associated with it, which isn't seen with cash. So a lot of smaller businesses are still quite hesitant to adopt these services. So even if people have these apps, they can't actually use them. So they still need to use cash to make payments. But then there's other factors as well, which is more cultural related. So, Japan has a really low crime rate and, the number of kind of crimes associated with robberies or muggings or things, is incredibly low compared with other kind of developed G7 economies. So actually carrying around large sums of cash is not seen as being a risky practice. So people are still very comfortable with doing that. And also as well, Japan's aging population is another issue where people don't really want to move away from things that they've been used to. And Japan actually has the oldest median population in the world, and that, like, statistically, like nearly 30% of the population is over the age of 65. So there's a lot of reluctance really from kind of the older generations, who do actually make up a very large proportion of the society, to move away from using the payment methods that they've always been used to. So really there's a great combination of elements about why cash still remains dominant, and why the digital payment methods haven't really come to the fore like we've seen in other Asian markets.
Well, that certainly explains some of the key issues holding it back. Perhaps certain institutions are looking to develop more innovative forms of payments that might appeal to the Japanese market.
Yeah, so we are starting to see that now. There are a few different institutions that are starting to develop different payment methods. So, for example, Google has recently bought out Pring, which is a cashless payment provider. And Google is already very well known. It's a well-known brand in the country, and also people who have, Google Pay on their phones, like that is another payment method that's used. So there is some possibilities that might actually expand Google's reach really, and create a brand that maybe more people are familiar with. But also, we're seeing brands like PayPay, like I say, they're really linking up with Line Pay, but they're also really looking to introduce more functionality into their platform as well. So they can, you can transfer funds between individuals and send and receive features, rather than just making a payment via the app. And then also you've got MUFG, the bank, which have been developing a blockchain payment network, which is looking to launch this year. But also they've been developing a digital currency called MUFG coin, at least provisionally. But as of yet, there's no release date for that. And there was originally some talk around the launch being in 2020, but nothing has been confirmed yet. But I think finally, one area where there might be some developments is that the Bank of Japan is looking to develop a digital currency, like a central bank digital currency. It's really in the early stages now. I think they began to launch in April 2021, and the plan is to move through into the second phase of the process in 2022. So there's no real definitive plans yet about what that will actually be, but it's in that kind of pilot test case process at the moment, where they're looking into the possibilities and the functionality, and that is a potential route that the country could go down in the future. But as it stands at the moment, a few of these things I've mentioned are really still in the very early stages or in their infancy. So it's probably going to be quite a while before we actually see these come to fruition yet. So I think Japan's payment landscape looks broadly like it will still remain very cash dependent for the next few years to come.
Well, Kim, thank you. The development of digital payments anywhere in the world is obviously a vitally important issue, and one that we will monitor closely on The Banker.